The Sharpest College Football Podcast, our Week 10 preview. This is the big show. This is the one that everybody watches, whereas a few people watch the reviews. But we thank everybody for joining us. Numbers keep on going up and up. We apologize for being a day late this week, but we promise you a good show, a lot of good content here. If this is your first episode, thank you so much for joining us. And if it is your first time, this is the glossary. We refer to these metrics throughout. Do a screen grab here, save it in your college football workbook, and refer to it throughout this episode and all other episodes. I am BuckMetrics. I am joined by the brilliant Robert Martin, who graced the state of Florida and our beautiful United States with his presence. Now he's back up in, is it chilly, Canada yet? Is it, what's it like up there?
It's 18 degrees Celsius, which is, I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. Not warm, but not cold. Probably like 60 something. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Did you see the SNL sketch where it's like the one guy is like George Washington? There's gonna be like two separate. Did you watch this sketch or not?
No.
Okay, look up SNL George Washington. It's hilarious. As a
Okay.
Canadian, it's great. I think a lot of Americans would enjoy it too. But no, it's good to be back up here. It was raining when I came in today, but again, it's a lot warmer in Florida. But it was really nice in Florida this last weekend though. But yeah, good to be back home where I like the temperature just a little bit cooler. As a Canadian, that's you have to have that. It's part of your citizenship requirement.
Glad you enjoyed it. You know what else we enjoyed was week 9 again, another really good
Yeah.
week. 13-7, dual model, good. My over under play is very good. Combined 13-7, 65%. That is brilliant. Better than that for actually just a little bit less than that. I think we're actually like 63% for the season, but that is still just, again, just to say the same thing over. This is beyond professional level, and this is for life to date now. This is our third year of doing it. Just mentioning this because literally we have not had a losing week so far this season. There's going to be regression. It would be awesome if we could run the table and just not have a losing week. We'll see. Anyways, good job by us. Looking back on our dual model plays, Navy, I think you embraced that a little more than I did. I just didn't want to fight the model on that. JMU was just a weird team. Yeah, I don't know. They've got some baffling losses, and then that just some dominant wins, and then just a whatever effort here against Southern Miss. BYU at Central Florida, we had the under here. I actually was lucky enough because I'm old and I do stupid things like this. I actually typed my bet and I actually played the over here, counting it as a loss, but cashed it as a win. And in part one, we talked about whatever this thing was that happened in Minnesota. What a weird game that was. Minnesota just flexing its muscles. We'll see if that continues. My total plays, 6-3. Talked about the dual model plays. The only other one besides that lost was Washington and Indiana. And I think just looking back at that real quick, far from Indiana's best game, probably also a function of their backup quarterback being in there. Any results of this one or the other slide really stick out to you?
Yeah, there was a couple of close calls. I think obviously some weirdness in some of those games with BYU. UCF was a little higher scoring than I think we had thought. Obviously, insanity happened in the Maryland Minnesota game. We like so I yeah, it was 6-4, but there's ways I could have been like basically an 8-2 or 7-3. Again, we did well there. Yeah, the Washington and Indiana one, yeah, that kind of barely went under there. I think they got to what, 40 something?
48.
48,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, if Rourke had been playing there, I think they definitely would have gone over there. Nebraska at Ohio State, that's a pretty cool under. That was a really nice one there to hit as well. I just straight up bet Nebraska plus like the 25, then wasn't even, not even close. That was
Yeah.
not even a close call at all. Were they even? I don't think they're covering 10, let alone 25.
Yeah, I don't think they were recovering double digits at any time during the
No,
game.
so very low stress early win there for me. The thing was, it was crazy. I got like 16-1 on Nebraska money line. Again, obviously, whatever. I'm happy I won money, but could you imagine? That would have been insane. Just cashing a 16-1 money, and that was not impossible. They could have won that game. They
Yeah.
easily could have won that game. Again, Ohio State, and I think we're going to talk about them a little later. Not a lock here for the college, not a lock for the playoff or to win
No.
this thing. They are not looking as strong as people thought. Yeah, they're not a lock here.
Yeah, that game with Indiana, it's a home game. I think they're lucky now. It's a home game for them, I believe. That's looming is basically their playing game. So their resume is not, it diminishes pretty rapidly. Got to also say that this LSU Texas A&M, there's a bit of luck in that basically Marcel Reed came in for Connor Wegman, who stunk and just basically made that over happen by himself. Little lucky on that. Looking back on one game here, we talked about this a little bit in in part one. This whole thing just went sideways, but the thing that absolutely just made no sense at all is you've got Brosmer has just not been a good quarterback. This was the graphic from last week. Just coming into the game, apex of 74. You had a below average, but still decent Maryland pass defense here with a defensive apex of 114. And what does Minnesota do to the game? An apex of almost 200. That just, if you bet on feel and trends and that kind of thing, and you think that this is the real Max T. Brosmer, God bless you. Just bet with two fistfuls on Minnesota the rest of the way out. I'll just be nice and say I need to be convinced this is how it is going to be going forward.
Yeah, no, again, just an insane offensive performance here in Minnesota. Definitely out of character there. But that also, in the future, though, that opens up possibility. Start betting a couple Minnesota unders.
Yeah,
Not as one door closes, another door opens.
very well said. Yeah, you're a lot more philosophical than I am. I just am get alternatively angry and mean. Which one of us is the American on the podcast? Let's figure that out. All right. The metrics through week 9, notwithstanding a couple of interesting performances, I guess we'll say Texas remains number 1. Not a bunch of movement here. Interesting, your model is still not that high on Miami. Maybe you've got just a lot more Mario built into your model than than mine does. You've got Indiana number 2 behind Oregon. My model just remains relatively unimpressed by Oregon. I just, again, good offense, good defense, just not truly exceptional on either side of the ball. And I think that's when I noticed that when I dug in a little deeper. Your model is a lot more partial to well balanced teams like Oregon. Mine, a good example is Cal. That power rating of 13 is basically almost all their defense and basically having an average offense, but an exceptional defense really drags it up to a 13. Yours punishes Cal for their inept offense, and I think we can do a lesser parallel to Iowa State here. You've got them in the 30s, and I've got them in the top 15. On the same note, new to my top 20, South Carolina 18, who was really miserable on offense, elite defense, and not surprisingly, you've got them at 49.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I the thing is there are merits to both. I think there is a lot of value in the combined. I think when we agree on one, like for example, you have Tennessee 8, I have Tennessee 9, that's great. Good job. I think there are merits to both in term, and I think there's value in the combined kind of average between them. I think mine is a bit more extreme, having South Carolina say like 49, that's a bit extreme. Even Cal at 36 or Iowa State at 30. That's a bit extreme. I like how we both have Ole Miss. I have them at 3, you have them at 4.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. We're like, this team is good, but this team's not good. No, actually, this team is actually good. And this is the value of it. Like, although there is some in my model priced in of, oh, this team is actually like wins and losses are somewhat priced in a part of the calculation. My model is heavily based on what I actually if I would have that team favored or not. And I think yours does the same, and I think that's where we're agnostic to wins and losses. That's how it comes out in the wash, and that's why you get some teams that have a couple of losses. Like for example, you have Washington 12th, I have them 25th. They should not be anywhere near that, but yet they are because we think they're actually still a pretty good team. So I think there's a lot of value in there. I think my model probably also thinks that Cam Ward throws like a bunch of interceptions. That's why they're probably 17th for Miami. So no, I think there's merits to both. I like my ranking more for some teams, and I like your ranking more for some other teams. So I think a blend is. I think I'm too low on Georgia, but I think 15 is a. I don't think they're the number 2 team in the country. I think they're
No,
15 is
no.
about right. Maybe 15 to 20. Yeah.
We will talk about them shortly, too. Believe me,
Hmm.
they're coming up here. Yeah, one other thing, too, is we both agree on Army. I don't know. I can't see them realistically as like a top 6 team. But I think that they're still, this is a recording at this point. They're completely underappreciated by the market. The market is still slow. And I don't know if the market's just, if there's too much of an AP pull factor to the market where they just don't get it. This is a vicious team. They have a pretty good defense too. Last week, I had Navy I think, just sleeping into the top 20. So that's why I was not so high on them against Notre Dame. I think when Army plays Notre Dame, you will see a more representative showing than what we saw from Navy last week.
Yeah.
All right. Top 20 offenses, really not a lot of movement this week. Although, interestingly, personally, up to number 15, getting the hang of it. Although at the same time, I've been saying for a while Rutgers defense is vastly overrated. So scoring 42 points against Rutgers probably nudges you up a little bit, but it's not that impressive. Interesting that they come out with the same offensive rating as Penn State, a team that they went to overtime with. But we talked in part one about Baylor and their quarterback Sawyer Robertson, who's really just been on fire the last couple of weeks against some bad competition, but he's been as good as you would want against that bad competition. And this is interesting. This is one of those things. My plays and our dual model plays are dictated solely by what our models say. But this, for people that actually just want to look at our metrics and just use them as data points for their own line making, I would definitely highlight that, particularly Baylor. I think that you would have to dig deep into the sharpest of sharp people to really get to a few people that will say, yeah, Baylor's actually got a really good offense here. That would be my takeaway here. If I think I'm smarter than dual model plays, which I wouldn't recommend, but hey, do your own thing. That's kind of part of the fun, is figuring out your own puzzle. But I think that's really the gem to take away from this one. Yeah.
Yeah, Baylor was actually sneakily good. They had a nice little cover there for us against Oklahoma State. So Baylor is like sneakily good on offense, not good at all on defense, but sneakily good on offense. So that's an interesting point to have sometimes. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Uh oh. What did I do here? What did I do here? Let me go back here. There we go.
Yeah.
That was interesting. All right. My team offensive metrics here. Top 10 rushing. Clemson sneaks into the top 10 now. Right when I had buried them, they figured everything out. Their offense had turned around. I'm still need to be convinced on their defense, but their offense, I don't know. I don't watch Clemson games. They're just not a fun team for me to watch. I don't know if Dabo has just figured out that he needed to hand the reins over to Garrett Riley, and that's what we're seeing here. But they just, from a metric standpoint, they're an entirely different team this year than last year. And receiving, Ohio State, what's interesting here is they've got the firepower at receiver, and I think that's getting into the top 10 at this point was probably a function of the level of desperation unexpectedly that they were facing against Nebraska and not really being able to run the ball last week.
Yeah, it is interesting that they're more of a that Ohio State is this running team, and Nebraska was actually able to finally shut them down from doing that. And now they, so yeah, and also Clemson. People see those massive numbers and they're just like, oh man, Cade Klubnik just tearing it up. No, they're mostly getting that through the ground. Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
good stat lines for Cade Klubnik, but a lot of that is already set up by their pretty strong ground game. So I really like for the ACC there's a really interesting kind of Miami, Clemson, SMU. And I think the market is pricing in two of them making it to the playoff. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't
I can
know.
see a path. I can see a path. If you get two undefeateds in the conference title game and neither of them is SMU, I can see a path.
Maybe. I don't know.
If
I think
undefeated
some
Clemson beats undefeated Miami, because Miami's already starting at a high place in the polls. Actually,
Clemson
no,
is
sorry, take that back.
yeah,
If Clemson's a one loss team,
to
if
Georgia
they
though.
beat
But yeah,
Miami, and then basically if Miami's only loss
it's
is
that
to your
Clemson game.
conference champion that has one loss on the season to Georgia, that's, believe me, I'm not emotionally making the case, but just objectively, it's hard to go against that.
No, true. 100. I agree with you on that. But if you're sitting here and you're the committee, and let's say it's something like I don't know, like in the SEC championship game. What if it's something like Texas A&M versus like Texas A&M? They if they beat Texas, I'm not sure the rest of their schedule, but like they have a couple other. If they go
That can't happen.
undefeated,
I don't think that'll happen because one of those teams will have two losses.
oh no, I'm Texas A&M if they beat Texas, right? So it'd be like Texas. Say it's Texas A&M and like
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Alabama or something. Like if it's like one of the if it's like if you've got like a two loss Georgia and like a two loss Texas sitting there on the
Yeah.
side, and like you also have a two loss Ole Miss and like a two loss LSU or something like probably one of those would have three losses, but like I think if there's like a cluster of one loss SEC team and then like three two loss SEC teams and one of those wins the conference championship game, I really don't like because I don't if
Yeah.
it's one loss team wins the SEC, but then it causes a loss to a two loss team. Then are you going to take the other two loss teams, put them in, and then take penalize the three loss team for losing the championship game? Or are you going to put them in ahead of the other two and then see? This is where I think it's going to get to a point when it's going to be like, oh, is it this two loss SEC team or this one loss ACC team? And again, I do not trust the college football playoff committee to make the right decision on that.
Yeah, two thoughts on that. Number one, I don't want logically I can't see the argument to not punish the SEC team for losing the title game, but then punishing Miami for losing the title game to a one-loss team who's actually undefeated in conference. The second thing is the real answer is let's just ask the Sugar Bowl president, and because he's going to have this say over the matter. One other thing on this slide, we talked about this team in part one when we were reviewing week 9. You've got brilliant Service Academy, best rushing game, conventional running game population. And who's number 4 here? Jacksonville State. I got pretty passionate about it. I think that they are your favorite to win Conference USA. They should be. They're not right now. If you're fortunate enough to have a book that offers that kind of action, it's not the juiciest of price, but just from a who I think is better, this might be the time too. Now, Tyler Huff, the quarterback, I heard is dinged up. Not sure if he's going to play, but I think this is going to be the highest price that you're going to get on Jacksonville State probably for the rest of the season, unless they do something really dumb against Liberty here. All right, my top 10 player metrics. Boy, this is I don't know if you remember. I think it was last week. I had a data point that really excited me about Tulane going into the top 10 with one of the top 10 pass defenses when we got into the defensive metrics here. And now we've got their quarterback who is really good, obviously, in the top 10 of quarterbacks for Apex here. This is year 1 of John Summerall, and this is a team I am really going to keep my eyes on next year. Now, I don't think they're going to be a huge surprise, but I think that just looking way ahead, this would be the team that I would say could be the sneaky, by far the best G5 team, and start with that assumption and just convince me otherwise. Other point before I throw it to you is interesting. Toledo, who's not having the good season, now they have a top 10 receiver in Jerwan Newton. They lost again. I can't remember to who. Oh, Bowling Green. Matt or Jason Candle is just out of it now in the MAC. Just he's not going to make the MAC title game.
Yeah, it's Tulane is an interesting team. They beat who they play this week. They beat someone, but they barely
They
covered the
just
spread.
played North Texas.
North Texas. Yeah, it was 7.5
Okay,
points.
yeah.
Yeah, 7.5. They won by 8. So they won and covered, but it was like a backdoor-ish cover by North Texas.
Backdoor almost cover.
Backdoor almost cover. Yeah, it was a more. Tulane has been a really good team. And
Yeah.
is this their year? No. But if all of a sudden they're playing next year, if they play a Power 5 team, that's a team I'm gonna circle that game. I'm gonna be like, hey, that's an upset possible, right? We're looking at Army a lot this year, and rightfully, but will Army be able to replicate this again next year? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe this is their magical season, and then that's it. I don't know, right? You never know. But this Tulane team is pretty scary. And again, I think they're working with that new quarterback. I think he'll be back next year, assuming he doesn't get picked off. But that's the key, right? Assuming he doesn't get picked off by another school. But yeah, no, like that Tulane team could be a little scary next year. Like we're at a point now where some of these G5 kind of private schools, they can do a lot with a lot of if they have enough
Yep.
funding, they can actually do a lot here. And like you look at Tulane, you look at not Notre Dame. Notre Dame is obviously its own category, but like when you look at some of these kind of bigger G5 schools that actually want to invest money into the sport, they can actually do some real damage here, and they can field some pretty half decent teams. It's not that hard to get a good coach and a good quarterback and a good enough team to win these things. And at that point, then you're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the playoffs. So it's definitely possible that they could be a team to watch next year.
Yeah, two thoughts on that, and then one of my own. Going across sports, the biggest recruit in college basketball, he's from Northern California. To your point exactly, though, just in terms of the private G5 schools, it looks like there's a serious chance this kid might go to BYU because they can pony up the 4.5 million in NIL for 1 year, which is interesting, which takes me back to your point specifically to Tulane and Darian Mensah. Going back to our discussion in the Week 9 review, this is where Mike Norvell should at least check. Don't know if it's weird to say if Tulane really wants to invest in Mensa and just throw all their money at him, that would be interesting to see, but that's where he needs to look. My other point on this is I was just all excited in the last slide about Jacksonville State being the number 4 rushing offense in all of FBS, and look who is the number 9 passer in terms of effectiveness and efficiency. This is why I feel so strongly. And I think at this point I'd be very comfortable in saying, considering how weird Liberty has been, not just in one stupid game, but just all season, they've just had a bad season. I think I'd put Rich Rodriguez at the top of the coaching list in that conference too.
Yeah.
All right. So we go from the exceptional to the bum list. And you know what? I like I said in the review of week 9, I can't even blame him for this. This guy, Jackson Arnold, welcome to the bum list. You see the movie here's the old guy moment of the week where I say a movie and you say I've never heard of it. Good Will Hunting. Have you seen that movie?
I've heard of it, not
I've
seen it,
heard of
no.
it. Okay. All right. Just Google Good Will Hunting. It's not your fault. That's what Jackson Arnold needs here. He just needs a therapist hugging him and saying it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Because it's not his fault. I'm still not convinced I'm not convinced he's anything because the offensive line stinks, and that was just brutal to watch. So I am convinced he's not the third worst quarterback in all of FBS. I'll say that.
Do you, are we talking about a coaching change at Oklahoma or not?
He just got re-upped before the season. Oklahoma fans are not too excited about that. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, they fired their offensive coordinator, which we know, like we talked about in part 1. That's always a winning move, right? It did
Yeah,
wonders for Utah.
that's true.
So, yeah. All right. Defensive side of the ball. This is interesting. This is really interesting. Not a lot of movement in here. Only one new team, and it was Pitt jumping up to number 14. And what's interesting about this is I thought, okay, you pick off the opposing quarterback 5 times in a game. You're gonna just have an insane apex that's gonna drive your defensive rating way up. So I think Pitt's defense is good. I remained unconvinced after doing this slide that they were number 14, but I will just let you comment before we move on.
Yeah, I think that game was a bit of an anomaly, and by bit, it was clearly a massive anomaly.
We don't see
But
3 pick sixes like every week. No, that doesn't
yeah,
happen all the time.
like, how do you? Obviously, you practice, but you're not like. Could you imagine like getting your quarterback out there? It's like, all right, throw it to that guy. Who your receiver? No, the deep back. Throw it right to his chest, and then we're gonna scheme it up to see if we can get a pick. No, you don't do that. That's not. That doesn't. That's not a practicing thing you do, unless you're FIU apparently. But no, it's. Yeah, it's I don't know. I think it's a little iffy. They are not a bad team. They've had some good defensive things. That's why we've been on a couple of their unders. But no, they're good. I don't think it's the defense that's getting them the wins though. Their offense is actually pretty good. Narduzzi's actually done a pretty good job this year. Actually, I have a lot of complimentary things to say about them.
Yeah, yeah. Now we're going to get to the what I think is a really interesting point. No new teams in top defensive apex, but looks who jumps into the top 10 at number 4. It's Pitt. So as crazy as that defensive effort was from a pass defensive standpoint, it was really their run defense in this game that vaulted them into the top 4 and really made them a top 15 defense by my ratings. Other interesting thing here, Nebraska jumps into the top 10 after going against what, read into it what you will, a top 5 team, Ohio State, going against that team on the road, and you hold their running game so much that you jump into the top 10 in terms of run defense. Now, Ohio State was without their starting, I think, left tackle or left guard, and then number 2 actually got hurt during the game, so they were down to number 3. So this is a pretty good spot from that standpoint for the Nebraska defense, but still, it's not one position that wins or loses an entire offensive defensive battle here.
Yeah, I think Nebraska is like a really good team. I think our rankings kind of show that a little bit. They're getting more. They're probably better than the credit than they are getting credit for. But again, they are 3-loss, right? So that's the thing. Again, we were high on Nebraska this year. We had outside chance of them getting to the playoff. I don't think that's in the cards for this year, but like next year will be the year where at this point having losses is actually not bad, right? Because every time you get a loss now, it just lowers their hype for next season just that little bit more.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine by me. Okay, if Nebraska loses a fourth game and they're 8-4 and people are like, "Yeah, Nebraska's only ever going to go 8-4." I'm totally fine with that because this is a good team. This team keeps getting better and better every year. Again, they're definitely going to make a bowl this year. That was like they could have made a bowl last year, but it was just like this futile task of scoring points in some of those games. This Nebraska team will actually be pretty good. I think this Nebraska team will definitely make a bowl game this year. Probably cover the over wins, but again, I'm okay with them losing a couple more games down the stretch.
To your point, they have lost 3 games. The combined record of the 3 teams that have beaten them is 20-3.
Yeah,
I believe me, I can. There's nothing unforgivable on the resume here for Nebraska. Ryle
because
is having some freshman times, but whatever. The defense has come to
freshmen.
play this year.
Because that's Indiana, Ohio, and
Illinois, 2 loss Illinois.
Illinois. That's right. Yeah, two losses Illinois. Their losses are to Penn State and Oregon, which their losses are derivatives
Yeah,
of. So again,
yeah.
they are.
Illinois, who's lost to 2 undefeated teams.
Yeah, good company to have.
Yeah,
Yeah, actually, let me talk about that quickly because that's like your small little bonus thing that annoyed Robert this week because Illinois dropped 4 slots. And okay, Illinois was the 20th team and they dropped, I think, to 4 after they got destroyed by the number 1 ranked team. But that's the point. They're the number 1 ranked team. If you
yeah.
thought the team was the 20th ranked team, they shouldn't be competitive with the first ranked team. And okay, they beat them and they covered the spread. Okay, it doesn't mean you drop them 4 slots. It means that, hey, maybe the first place team is better than we thought they were. Like, mini rant over again. We talked. I didn't want to do it because we talked about the AP poll last time, but that's my mini thing that annoyed me this week of just dropping Illinois 4 points because they just got beat by the number 1 team in the country.
I love that point, and to that point, and this is a team that I like, and I need to come through for me. But do we honestly think that SMU would do any better than Illinois did because they're the number 20 team right now, where Illinois was last week?
Yeah,
No, there's no way. To your point, that's no silly. I like that. Took us 10 weeks or 9 weeks, however many if you count the preseason, 20 weeks to make a brilliant point like that. Good job by you. I still have yet to make one like that. All right, you ready for some previews?
yeah. Let's get into the games.
All right. It seems I'm actually, to be honest here, I'm surprised how many people are watching Island Time. That was just let's see what we can slap together here, and it's getting a lot of views. So thank you again. If you want to watch it this week, it's going to drop on Friday just because of schedules and life getting in the way and all that stuff. But Duck will be with us to go over 5 games that we're not covering and 1 game that we are covering today, but in different context. So with that, Robert, a early happy Halloween. And why do I bring up that it's Halloween? Because what does that mean? It means that the clock will be turning to November by the time most of these games start. And what does that mean? You might recall in the first preseason episode, do you remember this chart when I broke down my model in weeks 5 to 9 versus the rest of the season? And I
Yeah,
said basically October is harvest time. The bad news is my model, you can see literally from 2015 to 23, we throw out the COVID year because we don't even know when week 1 was in that crazy year. All the other seasons, basically, my model just in when I have the margin of 11 and 19 points, almost 16% win percentage in weeks 5 to 9. 10 plus, it loses 8% ROI. Now, why do we still play? Now we have this is just my model, but now we have the benefit of the dual model. So I picked up last week as an example. Last year as an example. Last year through week 9, the dual model plays and the total plays, which do stand up longer than just the sides that I play. 66.7% through week 9, 65%. That can just be just 1 game variance. That's basically the same record here. But what is really interesting to me, and this makes sense, 51 plays in 5 weeks. That's basically 10 a week, right?
mm-hmm.
37 over these next 5 weeks. So what we're seeing here is I think that your model is really filtering out a lot of my losers here. So we're getting fewer plays, but we're winning at still a nice clip. Now this is 1 season, but it's not just weeks. This is 1 season. So I think it's promising. And I bring this up because long way of saying you're gonna see fewer plays this week, but we're hoping that the dual model nature of these will basically make them just about as profitable as we've been so far. And last week, we're basically tracking about this number again this year too.
Interesting theory for us to test there. Is it my model closes stronger and it's weaker in the beginning, and you're filtering out my bad plays in the beginning, and then I filter out your bad plays in the end?
I think there's something to that too because Yeah, that's a really good point because there's just twice as many, or yeah, there's twice as many here as there too. So these numbers just about mirror this ratio right here as well. If that makes sense. All right, and with that, we get to our first game. South Florida at FAU. Amazingly, just going right to the bottom here, we actually have the exact same score of FAU by 9 points. I'm I'll put it this way. I was very interested in your model because when I see my model saying, "Hey, guess what? Cam Fancher is gonna win by 9 as a 2 point dog," but you've got it this the same. And then I looked up, and what's really surprising is you've got some bad numbers here in terms of just both sides of the ball for South Florida. I think that their season just peaked with that Alabama close call, and since then it's just been downhill. You've got a really bad pass defense here. They cannot stop the pass at all. Not that Cam Fancher is good, but I think this figures to be probably his best game of the year. And look at this. Between Fancher and Byron Brown, who is throwing the ball better? Actually, Cam Fancher, surprisingly. Not a good run defense here on FAU, but you know what? It's not like they're going against a huge running game here. Not only is this a dual model play, but this is a wrong team favored play as well. So if you're going to play the side, especially within a field goal, I'd grab some easy money line, just the plus money as well.
This has actually moved a tad. It's now full 3. So you're getting
Are you kidding?
Florida Atlantic plus 3 at home.
What did you run a disinformation campaign when you were down in Miami last week?
Yeah, like this. No, this team is bad. Don't bet this team. No, I love this play. There was a chance we changed up our trip plans. I could have been going to this game, so we'll see. Maybe
Ah,
next year we'll be going to an FAU game. But yeah, no, it's as an FAU fan by proxy. So yeah, I'd love to see FAU win this game and not do anything for the rest of the season because I don't think they're going to be bowl eligible. But whatever, they could win this game. It'd be really cool. So
yeah. All right. This one I just don't get. But again, we have basically the same score here. I've got Stanford with a field goal more than you do, but we both have NC State with 34. Stanford, I like the idea of Stanford coming into the season, and the execution has not been there. They really needed to beat Wake Forest last week, and they failed. They are a miserable passing team, and they're not very good at running the ball either. I'm not a huge NC State fan, but they do have functional competence passing the ball. And guess what's not functionally competent? The Stanford pass defense. 152 defensive apex. NC State's always decent to okay to good on the defensive side of the ball. This is just a mismatch right here. North Carolina, okay, whatever ACC offense, but Stanford is they're just not an FBS. They're definitely not a Power 5, Power 4 level offense here. So I'm really comfortable. I'm a little baffled by this number. I'm in the what am I missing category here. Like I tried to Google injuries on North Carolina State. I didn't see anything. Not that some of the scientific process, but unless I'm missing something big, I love this play.
couple things. This has moved in our favor. This is now 9.5. That's a very significant number right there. The 10.5 to 9.5 is
Yeah.
actually a very huge point. No, I agree. I think like Stanford is not good. Stanford has not done many good things at all this year. Like we've been actually, I would actually say, interestingly enough, our model has actually been like pretty actively fading Stanford. I think we've faded them a couple of weeks in the last. I think we've played them twice in the last 3 weeks. I think we want the dual model play was Notre Dame against them. I think there was
Yeah.
another one too. I think right. I
I think so.
think
Yeah, I can't remember it right now.
I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but we've wanted to fade Stanford a couple times in the last 3 weeks, and I see no reason to stop that now. Like they basically the modeled spread there of because it's a 46.5 spread, so that's what like a 26 to 16, give or take, something like that, or it'd be like I guess 28 to 16, whatever. I know, whatever. 26 to 16 is closer. That seems really competitive to me. I think the 34 to 8 or 34 to 11 makes a lot more sense than Stanford being able to put up multiple scores here. Now, NC State's not particularly good, but I think they can. I think they can probably They could probably cover this number. I don't think they. I think they can easily cover this by 2. Also, they're at home.
Yeah.
Stanford
I'm
is
just
coming.
looking up too. This looks like an early game too. It
Yeah, it's an early game.
it
So this
kicks
is
at
early.
9 Pacific time.
So you're going cross country to
Yeah.
the other side of the country. I'm assuming you're staying overnight, but then you're playing a football game at 9 a.m. in the morning. are these engineering students really up for are like whatever. But again, yeah, that's a really tough spot. And you're saying they only need to cover a 10 and now a 9.5. I don't see how that's unless we're missing something here. I don't see how I don't see what we're missing here.
Yeah, I was just checking. I did get 9.5. Now maybe this has moved since, but you
I'm
said
seeing
it's
nine
at
and a
nine and
half.
a half
I've
now.
got nine. I've
Yeah.
got Bet365 here. It's 9.5 live.
Yeah, unless not to be a jerk here, but I don't really know what on North Carolina State is so valuable that okay, this guy's hurt. This makes a big difference. To your point, they're not a great team. I don't know. So unless I'm missing something here, I love this one. But yeah, I went max bet on that. Also, as we say again, this is not a recording, but Jesus, the market is so slow on Army here. One of my favorite things every week is to see what does Robert's model have for Army. 60-2.
I guess they're getting a safety. I don't even think
That's
safety is programmed in the model. Actually, I don't think it actually is.
no,
Like
that's yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's you know what it is? It's the return blocked 2-point conversion.
there you go. Yeah.
There you
Or
go.
it's
That's what
like
it is.
they've got a 66% chance of kicking a field goal. That's the
Yeah.
that's the applied probability.
Their one opportunity.
No,
So,
the thing is my model does do weird stuff with rushing teams. That being said, yours is not that much less weird. Yours is also we both have Army covering the total. I feel like the books like the thing is I think with the NFL models, I think there are people who are like because again, there's only 16 games on a busy week on your standard weeks. There's only 16 games. I think there are people who like they consult a model and they manually set the lines, but I feel like for college because there's some odd games on any given week, I think the lines are set a lot more by the model, and I'm almost wondering because this is now the second time where it's because I wonder if they have something in there for Service Academy, right? Because people have loved all the sharps. I guess the people who love to talk about betting are always like, oh, bet unders in the Service Academy games, bet unders. So I almost wonder if in their model, and I feel like there's got to be something in their model where there's like a manual thing was like, oh, if two Service Academy teams push the
yeah.
point total under a bit. And there's probably other ones that they have programmed in there too. Oh, if this team on road in this condition, it's 2.5. Or if it's like there's probably a couple of things that they have manually programmed in there. And when they post this line, they're not going through that and checking it. They're just like, whatever, this is what the line is, it's done. And I think that if they're going through each line, they should be like, yeah, okay, that's way too low of a total. Army could score 50 in this game, and that the Army could cover the total alone, right? So what is this at now? It's 42, so it's ticking up. So get this
Yeah.
before it's gone, guys. But yeah,
Great points. Usually the total in the Academy games is in the mid to low 30s. And I think that, okay, maybe that 6-point difference is a nod to what this Army team is. I was concerned about that. I'm not convinced that Air Force is going to score. Their offense is really bad. And Army's got a good defense here, power rating of almost 5. But to your point, this is what I like about. So this is a dual model play on the over and the side. But I do like that we both have Army comfortably covering the total by themselves, which makes me I'm definitely on both angles, both the Army side and over the total. Because I think if you put a gun to my head and said which one of these is more likely, well, not more likely, which one of these is closer, the two's not more likely. I'm going with your 2 than my 10. I've seen enough Air Force ineptitude just that this Army defense, especially an Army defense that knows that's where I think you're really going to see the difference here. Is Army knows how to defend. Air Force has no idea how or do nor do they have the capability, let alone the knowledge to deal with this new Army offense.
yeah. One quick little point I want to make is that interestingly enough, so Bet365 they used to have a promotion, and they still actually have the promotion where if you parlay spreads and totals among if you parlay multiple spreads and totals, you get a cumulative little bonus. If you do 2, it's a 5%. If you do 3, it's a 10%, right? Trying to get people to bet parlays of spreads because they think people are going to obviously the books make more money on parlays than they do on straight spread bets. However, though, last year I was able to parlay, like basically parlay a spread and a total within the same game, but they've stopped that now. It has to be different games because I think what they realized is that, oh shoot, these are actually correlated. We're getting destroyed
Yeah.
here because we're giving people a 5% bonus to bet a thing we said. Yeah, I think that was that's the point there. So I think that's interesting how they caught on to that, like the spread and total are actually correlated in some way. So you can't give people bonuses for that.
Oh, this is a perfect example of that, because if it goes over 41, Army is absolutely covering. There's
Exactly.
zero
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Are you ready? I'm excited for you. So it's not the Oregon game, because I would not be excited for you. Buddy, how about this? I've
Yeah.
got you've got it straight up. I've got you covering too.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised. You've got two underreported angles here that I think the market is missing. Number one, capital F fired Billy Napier. And number two, guess what? Georgia's just not as good as everybody thinks. They're not the number two team in the country. You
Yeah.
add those up, and you've got a one score game here. You don't have a three-score game here.
Yeah. I think now. So I think this is, remember, this is neutral site. This isn't at Georgia. I think this is
Yep.
neutral site in some things. They've done something with. I think the current stadium, they do this under renovation, so it's a neutral site. This is
No,
a
it's always a
rival.
neutral site in Jacksonville.
Yeah, but I think they're putting it in a different stadium now because the one stadium's under renovation, or maybe that's a future year from now. I'm not sure, but it's always
Okay.
neutral site. But no, it's this is really interesting because, and I think that's why this is 16 and a half and not 17 and a half. Because I think the books know the right side to this, and I think they think that the money's going to come in on Georgia, and they're like, yeah, okay, we're going to make it 16 and a half because I think they're afraid of sharps on immediately jumping on Florida there. But I don't even think this is going to be close. I think close to that 17 and a half spread. I think this is probably going to look a lot closer to a close game, maybe a one, maybe a two score game. So I think, yeah, I like Florida straight up. I think you don't have them straight up, but I think your model definitely warrants a little tossing on the money line there for sure. Because what is that money line? That money line is probably massive, right? Yeah, plus 550. I think you warrant a little bit of spread on that, a little bit on that money line as well, even just down by 6. So no, this is interesting, right? And I placed this is like a dual bet because I'm gonna bet on this game, obviously, but I also bet on Georgia to not make the college football playoff, and
Mm.
like those, this is now, oh, okay, this is like a double cat. That would be a double thing if they were to lose this game. So, no, I think people are definitely underestimating fired Billy Napier, which is again insane because he was fired. It was done. It was over. And now all of a sudden he's 3-1 since he was fired. I don't understand how you could be fired and then go 3-1. It doesn't make sense to me. But okay, I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited for this game. This is a good rivalry game. Florida is looking the best they've looked in quite a while. Georgia is actually not looking the best they looked in quite a while. And I think because again, people will be like, "Oh man, Georgia, like they lost to Bama, like it was a couple bad quarters against Bama, they came back." But like Bama has not looked particularly great either. Like Bama lost to Vanderbilt, and they lost to someone else too. Who did they lose to? No, or Bama just won. No, Bama's two loss, right? Bama's two loss.
Yeah.
And
Why are we blanking on here?
I don't
I'm old.
remember.
That's my excuse. What's your
Yeah,
excuse?
I don't know. They lost to someone else.
What's wrong with
Yes,
us?
Tennessee. There we go. That's Tennessee. They're two loss now. That Georgia loss to Bama actually continually looks worse. And then, oh, but no, they came back. They beat Texas. Well, Texas just barely beat that Vanderbilt team. That win looks worse now because again, Vanderbilt apparently just circling the drain here of SEC teams. But no, this is when you look at these numbers and you say that doesn't really make a lot of sense. It should not be. It should not be this big of a spread here. I don't think Georgia is not as good. They're like the teams they've beaten have not been as good, and I think this is you're now seeing that in this not being a 17 and a half or a 21 and a half or something like that. This is, I think Florida could cover this, and Florida might have an outside chance to win this game.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that you've got Florida with the better metrics in the passing and running game. What I think to me is the wild card is this: you've got a true freshman quarterback here. So this could go anything from like 70 to 140, and I would not be surprised with that streaky freshman quarterback against not awesome, but still a good to very good. And you saw in Texas when they get a burr under their saddle, ornery Georgia defense. So that to me is going to be the most interesting. You've got a fascinating matchup there, and then you've got, okay, is Carson Beck just going to mope again and just make more bad interceptions or what? Really interesting kind of game shape here, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm sure that you're going to love this next one as I do here. This is just, again, another instance of guess what? The market is just slow on Oklahoma State. I don't know if they're just missing it, if they're just carrying forward from, they're just saying, oh, Ollie Gordon, and hey, 2 years ago, they beat Notre Dame in a bowl game. I just don't know, Robert. So, Arizona State giving one at Oklahoma State. This was interesting. It opened up as a pick 'em, and like different books are on different sides of it. I've seen pluses and minuses on both sides. I have no doubt about this. Oklahoma State. Let me stop. Redo. I'll reframe it. My only concern is how much of Jeff Sims has Kenny Dillingham got out of Jeff. Has he taken out of the Jeff Sims that's in there now? Because if he is still Jeff Sims, then that's a reason to be concerned. But is the Kenny Dillingham Jeff Sims not really Jeff Sims?
That's true. Jeff Sims looked not like Jeff Sims in the last game, but they did lose the last game, though, right? Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of that, but also Oklahoma State is also not particularly good, right? I think
Well, they're
Arizona
horrible
State,
on defense. Look at this.
yeah,
They're a sieve.
-8. That's probably like one of the worst defenses Jeff Sims has played against, probably. He
Yes.
used to like Big Ten West defenses.
To that point, thank you, Robert. Look at this. This run defense right here for Oklahoma State. This is the problem. The problem is they don't. Maybe Jeff Sims doesn't even have to be, a factor. This is a very obliging run defense here. Sorry to cut you off, but that
Yeah.
is probably just the most hopeful angle.
No, yeah, I like this. There's no, and then to be fair, this game has moved closer to us. I think it's now -2.5. I think in some books, yeah, -150 money line. So this line is moving quickly to Arizona State. Is it possible that we're getting is the Arizona State quarterback out for the season, or is he coming back? Maybe is that what the line is saying?
I've not heard. The things I hear, they might be without Sam Levitt, the quarterback.
Let's see, but again, I still think I think I like Dillingham more than I like Jeff Gundy. I think I've had some issues with Jeff Gundy over the past since we've been
Mike
doing this
Gundy.
podcast.
and,
Mike
and his
Gundy.
brother Jeff too, probably. But go on.
Yeah. No, I people are like, "Oh man, it's Mike Gundy," and I'm like, "Yeah, but he's not that good." Like how many times have we been in this podcast and we've been like, Oklahoma State, they're just not that good. They were what 13th, and I'm like, "There's no way." And then I think they immediately lost two of the next three games. It's insane how overhyped this team always is, and how almost they always underperform, except when they're playing Oklahoma, which they beat them for some reason. But anyways, outside of that one narrow example, this team is never that good, and I think I like Dillingham. I like Arizona State. I'm taking them in this game. I don't care.
All right. I will caution you in this next one. So we are on the under in this game, Texas A&M and South Carolina. We will keep our discussion to the total here because this is going to come up in Island time where we are on different sides of the side bet here. Interesting. So save that for when Doc can weigh in on that to drop on Friday morning. So this is just the total here. When I was just literally typing in the matchups from Action Network on as I do on my Sunday mornings, soon as I typed this up, I said, this is going to be an under game. I have no doubt about it because nobody. The market is just missing just how good South Carolina's defense is. Maybe obscured by the fact like they had 21 points and another field goal created against Oklahoma. But I think what did we say earlier in this episode? South Carolina had them like I think number 3 defense in all of FBS. I know you don't break out offensively and defensively, but I'm sure you have them very low offensively, which means that they're strong defensively. Just an elite number here, 13.5 rating on defense. Like I said, we've got differing outcomes here. I've got South Carolina by 8. You've got A&M by 1. We'll talk about that on Island time. But you've got this is just a dream under team just by itself in South Carolina. This 95 Apex, that's a raw number. I respect Lenore Sellers, but I don't think that you're going to get one of his best games passing here, especially against a very good Texas A&M pass defense. I outlined in part 1 when we did the week 9 review that I don't really know what Marcel Reed is going to bring in terms of repeatability from last week. And guess what, by the way? This is an elite pass defense in South Carolina that he's facing with a defensive apex of 56. Neither team gives up anything on the ground. This is like elite level stuff. And let's keep in mind, they've played some pretty decent offenses in the SEC as well. I was just delighted to see that, yep, when I typed this up, the first thing I thought is under. I've got 34, you're at 33. Basically, we're on the same number here. You comfortable with this?
Yeah, I actually do like the under here. I think we played another South Carolina under. Not obviously we played it 2 weeks ago and we lost it there with Oklahoma. But I think we play another South Carolina under and it was close. I do like South Carolina. I think they're actually a surprisingly better team than I think we thought they were going to be. And especially it's on the defense, right? It's the defense, and their
Yeah.
offense is just passable enough that if your defense is that good, you can win games that way, right? Yeah, I like the South Carolina team. I like the under here. We'll talk more about this game, and yeah, I think we'll have to see. I think this will be a very interesting game because again, you seem to favor South Carolina here. My model is not favoring South Carolina here. I'll put it that way. It's not. Oh, yeah, that's the thing. It's not against South Carolina, but it's not
Yeah.
for South Carolina perfectly. We'll talk more about that in Island time. I'm actually let's talk about this game. That's going to be a good game.
Two things. South Carolina is such an ideal number or ideal under team because they're such a dominant defense, a mildly dysfunctional offense, and you've got that athletic quarterback where you're just tempted just to run him more than even pass it. So you're not going to have a lot of explosive plays. This Ryan per game is pretty pathetic. That's really bad, actually. So you don't see a lot of. I think we saw every chunk play that they're going to run in that. There was an early season game. Oh, I think it was against Kentucky. It was the Auburn. I think it was when
Mm.
Auburn lost. Yeah. Or no, they lost to some. There was some crazy game they had early in the season. It was the Robbie Ashford. You lost a game where Robbie Ashford actually played well, but I think that got there all the explosive plays for the whole season. Last thing, you're thinking of Ole Miss at South Carolina. That was a Ole Miss beat them
Yeah.
27-30, total of 30. Beautiful number. Love that. Not too different from that is Kentucky at Tennessee. Robert, have I told you that I'm not really a big fan of the Kentucky offensive coordinator? Have we covered that?
I think we talked about that. Yeah.
Yes. I think we talk about that every week. And we've got, again, this is defensive rating here for Kentucky is just almost identical to what we're looking at South Carolina. I think the market's really, I've said my piece about Kentucky, just people aren't getting just how bad, what a mess their offense is. But if you basically just put these numbers and you explain these numbers to betting public person Y, they would just say this is not Tennessee. They would say this is Illinois or this is just a team like that. This is Army. I don't know. They would not see Tennessee. People think Tennessee, oh, Josh Heupel, spread them out, throw it way downfield, and maybe just a couple of stops, and you're going to win a high scoring game. They have been such a great under team this year, and market is just slow. And you know what? This number's adjusted, but it's not adjusted to just how all the dysfunction we see in Big Blue here. Look at this apex, 58. I don't know, Robert. Do you think Gavin Wimsatt can come in and work more magic next time against the Tennessee defense than he did against Auburn?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, the jokes just write themselves here. I like my total here of 5. Yours of 9 is
Generous.
it's just comedic. I love it. You have these just elegant single digit numbers sometimes. We both have
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee under 30. I love this play. We're both on the under for the dual model, so I've made this a full unit play here.
Yeah, this score, our scores are pretty similar here 29-5, 27-9. It feels like the same. We've seen this SEC game, I think, 3 or 4 times already this
Yes,
year, where it's one SEC team throttles another team, scores under 30 points, they score under 10. That's the game. There's the ball game.
we just
And I
talked
think,
about it.
yeah,
Ole Miss at South Carolina.
yeah, Auburn at Kentucky, 24-10, right? Like we're
Yes.
seeing this game keeps happening again and again. And again, people are like best conference, best teams. I think what you're seeing is that like all of them have okay-ish defenses, but offenses across the board in the SEC have massively regressed this year. And I'm not necessarily sure why. I think part of it is that a bunch of the quarterbacks have gone. We talked a bit about this last year where it was like there was no really good quarterbacks in the SEC. I think that problem has still not fixed itself. I think we're still getting to a point where we're still trying to recruit. Okay, with the exception of, say, Jackson Dart and Quinn Ewers. But again, the SEC is massive itself. With the exception of a couple of quarterbacks, there are really not a lot of good ones, and some are starting to develop. Like obviously DJ Langway at Florida, and you're starting to get some of the other ones. You're going to see the next crop, which is going to be Archie Manning.
Randy Griffith at Kentucky. You can keep on going.
But we're gonna have to. That one's gonna take a bit more development. I think that's gonna be the that's gonna be the Cam Rising path for him. But no, this is the. I think you just don't have that level of offense in the SEC. I think the defenses are still strong. I don't think the offenses in the SEC are there yet. And I think that because of that, I think we're getting values on a lot of these SEC unders.
Yeah, I agree. And I think especially in instances like this where you do have two really sneaky standout defenses, where if you ask a typical, not a typical college football fan who usually on a Saturday will spend most of their time watching, it's not crazy like me, where it's just like to the exclusion of everything else, Saturday is doing this and nobody get married or die on this day because you're not going to interrupt me. Your typical average, very interested fan, if you ask them to name the top two defenses in the SEC, I don't think if you had 100 of those people, I don't think more than one would just stumble upon South Carolina and Tennessee. And that's what I think is the beauty of these plays specifically. And I really doubt that they would include Ole Miss too, who I think we actually have rated high as well, because they would say Texas, Georgia, Alabama, just brand name their way into the answer here. Hey, make hay while it's, what do they say? Well, it's sunny outside or whatever. Market's off. So take advantage of it.
Yeah.
All right. Last one here of the dual model plays. And we did the week 9 review, talked about how Pittsburgh's defense just made a big jump. And all season, SMU's defense, not all season, since that really weird game to open the season at Nevada, defense has really been on point. And you've got, interestingly, Pitt's offense looks a lot better than my power rating gives them credit for. They seem competent. They do run a lot of shorter stuff, and they don't really stretch the field too much. Maybe that's, yeah, boy, I'm trying to be nice to Narduzzi because he hasn't really deserved to be shart upon. But maybe that's why Narduzzi is comfortable with the new offensive coordinator. He doesn't do like a bunch of stretch the field crazy stuff that would tend to drive Narduzzi nuts. Cade Bell it's reasonably in control. So you've got, I'm sorry I didn't highlight it here, but Pittsburgh is in the elite category here as being over 8. SMU that's not elite, but it's nice insurance here. We both have basically the same game here. I've got a total of 23. You've got a total of 22. We've got basically the same points for both sides here. Not really instinctive, because when people think SMU, they think offense too. And the Pitt season with Cade Bell, people are thinking that Cade Bell's turned around the team. He's taken their offense from just garbage to okay and good when paired with that defense. So this total looks really high, 59.5. It's just like the market's on a different narrative than what our numbers are telling us.
Yeah, it's a really high scoring game. I think people might be looking at that Syracuse game and being like, oh man, Pittsburgh dominated. But as we talked about before, that was mostly a defensive effort there on that point.
Yeah.
So I think if you take that away and you maybe get a more average Pittsburgh game, and like Pittsburgh does have a good defense, right? I think in the last game it showed itself as a bunch of pick sixes, but they normally don't do that. They'll stop the ball, get some fourth downs and get the ball back, but they're not really that. And their offense is pretty good too, but SMU's offense is okay, spluttered a little bit in the last couple of weeks. But their defense is also not horrible either. Yeah, I don't hate. I really like the under here. I think the under here is an underlooked angle to this important matchup, and this is the point now where the winner of this game can have a pretty half decent shot at the conference championship game. Like that, this is where we're at here, right? Like the winner of this game makes the championship game, depending on what happens with Miami and Clemson. But
Yeah, I think. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. You're right. You're right. You're right. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
like it's crazy how we're getting down to the crunch time of the season where it's like, hey, yeah, this game is really important. And I think this game's on at 8 o'clock, right? Yes, it is. This is 8 o'clock Eastern time, and this is going to have huge implications for the ACC championship game and obviously the playoffs because these are both undefeated in these teams are both undefeated in conference play. And the thing is, I like the under. If it was 58.5, I'm getting now, but Pitt plus 7.5. I don't hate that either. I think that's a very achievable number here for Pitt. Like they could definitely cover that. They could definitely win this game too. I like the under, and I think if you're in playing the under, I think there's an implicit the plus 7.5 isn't a bad play there either.
Yeah, I was just looking up. I agree, although that's just to be clear, that's not a dual model play. But the other thing I was just looking up is last week If you take out the 3 pick sixes, that total in the Syracuse Pitt game basically goes to 33. And that's not even undoing like the short fields that they got on the 2 other turnovers too. Yeah, I like this one for sure. Love it when there's such a big difference here, and just we're looking at a totally different narrative than the market sees. All right. So in addition to the 4 dual model plays that we had on the totals here, boy, it's just Arizona and UCF pops. It just UCF pops up every week. Now they're an over team. They were under last week, but I don't know. I'm tired with this. UCF did actually fire their defensive coordinator. The good news is, even though this is a play, this number moved and it is close. I've got it at 62. This number's since moved where it's not playable for me, but if you can get 55.5 and you just want to strictly follow the model, it is technically a play. I do Louisville at Clemson. I've been unconvinced on Clemson's defense. We talked about Clemson's offense coming to life in Louisville. You might remember I had them as the top offense for a couple weeks earlier in the season too. So market likes a high scoring game here, 61.5. You've got it at about that. I've got it at 70. So over is not my favorite play. If it's not a dual model, so I'm playing this for about 0.6 units. Can't imagine you have an opinion on that Arizona UCF. The UCF's been all over the freaking map this year.
Yeah, they have been. There's been games they've been really good. There's been games they've been really bad. So I don't. The Louisville Clemson game is interesting. That total's now streaking up to 63.
Wow.
So a lot of movement on that one. That's a point and a half move in like a couple days. So pretty crazy that we've seen that kind of movement in that game.
Yeah, I'm looking at what I got here. I actually got 61.
Wow, that's good.
So happy about that. Yeah. All right. Our preseason predictions. You, my friend, we both came close. You in the more visible game, you were leading late
Hmm.
into the fourth quarter, and Ohio State had to just nut it up and pull out a win there. But that ended up being a very good call by you, and as you said, a no sweat side bet on that on Saturday. Don't know if you saw this UTEP at FIU. I might have been like the only person in my time zone watching this one. Walden just gave a masterclass in just how to not manage the last few minutes of a game. He clearly made a fourth down. He converted by a yard. He had 3 timeouts left. Didn't call a timeout. Just all right. I guess we don't get the ball back. And so then Louisiana Tech basically they basically were called short on the fourth down. You know what? Nah, no reason to hurry out there. Get my guys on the field. Let's just take our time. So then Louisiana Tech just calls a timeout. Okay, we'll take a look at this. Louisiana Tech keeps the ball, runs out the clock, and wins the game. Or FIU, I'm sorry. Just frustration beyond belief. The guy's done I don't know. Really horrible coaching job. Just he benched his best quarterback. I don't get it, Robert. But we are not a UTEP podcast this year, even though we joke about it every year that we are going to be. We are not this year. No upsets coming up this week. We're all off. Just looking ahead, I've got Indiana over Michigan, which is looking pretty prescient, and I think Iowa State plays Utah before too long as well.
Yeah, that one looks pretty good. Akron, they did something this week. They beat Eastern Michigan, which
They
is
did pretty handily.
not nothing there. That's not nothing.
Eastern Michigan is nothing, but so was Akron. So we thought, and good for them. They need something to hang their hat on. And Robert, with that, thank you, college football. We love you. We love watching you. We enjoy betting on different mathematical angles pertaining to you. Thank you, everyone, for listening, watching. We very much appreciate it. Robert, good luck. And please, everyone, catch us on Island Time. That'll be dropping on Friday morning. Robert, I will talk to you then.
See you, everybody.